Welcome to the Wills and Estate Transmission Podcast, brought to you by Groots, specialist lawyers in wills and estates.
Hi, and welcome to the podcast channel for Groots. Today, we're honoured to have the founders of Groots, John and Margo Groot, to introduce us to the company. Hi, John and Margo.
Hi there.
Hi, Tony.
Okay, so let's start off with something really straightforward. And you've been going since established the company in 1986. So what motivated you to start your own firm?
Well, it was a set of circumstances that occurred that year that meant that I would start in April of 1986, actually. I had worked for another law firm and been thinking that maybe one day in the future I would do it, but just some family circumstances occurred, and particularly with my father, who was a retired accountant, and I hoped that one day we would always work together, and that was part of our plan. But he had an aneurysm on the brain in 1986, which brought John and I back from overseas. We'd been working and living over there for a while, and fortunately, my father did survive the operation to deal with that aneurysm, but it just brought my plans forward. So I decided at that point that I would start out on my own, and it was at that stage I think John was working at QUT, and it was, but he did have a practicing certificate. He always retained a practicing certificate, so that enabled me to start under the auspices of what was then John K. de Groot and Co. And then on the 1st of July 1986, I changed the name of the firm to de Groot and Co. And off we went. But it was, so it was a long-term plan brought forward, but one that meant that my father and I worked together then until he passed away in 1994. And so they were precious years. And it also meant that I was able to start a practice that in subsequent years John was happy to come to work back in practice after nearly 20 years of working at the university.
Yes, getting close to 20 years, that's right.
Wow.
So do you miss university, John? I know you still do some of that work now.
Yes, look, I always liked teaching, I liked writing, and I liked practice, so it was always nice to combine them. I obviously today I'm pretty much exclusively in the full-time practice. Do a tiny bit of teaching, but nothing really that you could say was of any significance. But I have enjoyed the teaching involvements that I've had over quite a lot of years. In fact, I did my first stint as a tutor at the University of Queensland the year after I graduated in law. So that was a nice start. I mean, I just finished my own law degree, and then I could contribute to the first year students and their understanding of law back then. So it's been the teaching side's been a long time in my life, but practice is obviously, I guess really, if I had to say where do I feel the happiest, it's probably, actually I was going to say it'd be practicing the law, but really no, the three I like probably equally.
And of course, you're a national legal firm here in Sydney, Melbourne, and of course the head office in Brisbane. So what led you to being a national firm?
Again, that was sort of, I suppose, in keeping with the times, that once I started in 1986, in Queensland at least, and I'm not sure if it was the case in New South Wales as well, but around the early 90s was when we started to see firms that were state-based starting to become nationally based. And they were absorbing some of the smaller firms and growing in that way. But we also started to, I suppose there was the demise of the general practitioner, at least in the CBD sense of the word. So I was keen to try to differentiate the firm. So that's when I chose to specialise, and specialising was only beginning really in the family law area. But
you were actually the first law firm in Australia to specialise in any field.
In wills and estates, at least. But the thing about it is that it's always been in my mind about differentiating the firm. So when I started to sort of as we moved on, and we had the start of the movement towards mutual recognition of lawyers. So we started to see more and more lawyers sort of crossing the border and starting to practice in Queensland or vice versa. And we were also starting to have more clients. We used a visited office down here in Sydney. And so I started to think it would be really good if we had an Eastern Seaboard presence, so that we could, rather than sort of waiting for firms to come in and sort of try to take our turf, that we could establish ourselves in each of those major cities and have a presence, which I think it differentiates us to be able to say to clients that whether you've got assets in New South Wales, Victoria or Queensland, we have an office, we can assist you. And again, it also takes account of there's been a greater movement of wealth within Australia. Once upon a time, people mainly owned their assets in the state they lived in, but now we've got many people owning assets all over the country, let alone internationally. So again, it was in keeping with just trying to make sure that as a firm we were moving forward, we were able to meet those needs.
And the other thing, I guess, too, is that 80% of the legal services of Australia are delivered in that Eastern Seaboard region. So, it does mean that having a presence in those three capital cities or those three jurisdictions is a very significant coverage of the legal services needs of Australia.
Tony, we have thought about Western Australia, we've thought about Adelaide, etc., and the model that we were trying to build was very much that of coming up with a blueprint for the firm that could be laid down in any jurisdiction, in terms of, yes, the local legislation would have to be taken account of, but having a model firm that, because wills and estates, wherever you go in the world for that matter, anybody over the age of 18 should have a will. So that gives us a broad marketplace to really try to address. And so we did talk in terms of a licensing model to begin with. And in fact, in making the move into New South Wales, we set up an advisory committee, which was comprised of various people who'd worked on a licensing model basis in different fields. And that really did give us a lot of ideas and help to establish ourselves down here.
You're talking about assets interstate. I know quite a few people that have investment properties in Brisbane as well. So they've got different laws. And as we'll discover in other episodes, there's different laws on wills and assets and in disputing assets in different states. So it's really important to get that right.
Yeah, it's a shame, really, because we're only 25 odd million people in Australia. But and there have been attempts. The Law Reform Commission, John's submitted many responses to efforts that have been made towards trying to get uniformity of succession laws across Australia. But they've never been able to bring that fully to fruition. We've got what they call harmonisation, but it's not the actual achievement of commonality of laws, which makes it difficult for people. Often dealing with their assets their assets have to be dealt with in different ways on their death. We
had one famous case a little while back before New South Wales changed its intestacy rules, where we had a man who owned a property in the same street, but it crossed the border. So he had one house in Queensland and another house in New South Wales, and the disposition of those two properties was totally different. Because of the different intestacy rules. Quite bizarre. You'd think that couldn't happen in Australia today, but it did, and people were in disbelief about it. I even went on Sky News about it in the efforts to try to get that commonality. And I don't credit myself with New South Wales and Queensland aligning their intestacy laws, but I'm very happy to see that they did a little after that, so maybe I made a small contribution.
Is that like some state of origin of laws?
Well, it is really, because there's been intractability, hasn't there? Or there's been each state sort of feels very strongly about certain aspects of its succession laws and won't give up on it. So notional estate is one particular subject that Queenslanders, sort of would shy away from, but New South Wales is very committed to.
but every other jurisdiction other than New South Wales also shies away from it. So it's not a Queensland, New South Wales thing. But yes, I think that ownership of that area of the law, the states, they gave up, obviously, company law and made that a federal thing, but effectively. But they don't seem to be wanting to give up their jurisdiction on the wills and estates area. And yet we could have the same rules for getting a grant of probate and a whole lot of things, that everything could be so easy and just done Australia-wide. But no, our political masters don't seem to be interested in seeing that happen.
So let's turn to Margo. Congratulations on your AM, your Order of Australia Medal. So it's quite an achievement. Can you please share with us a little bit more about that?
That was a really, it was a lovely surprise, and one I felt very grateful for those who had nominated me. And but like any journey, you don't sort of go on it on your own. So I've got a lot of people to thank for helping me with the various, I suppose, roles that I've been in that have given rise to that nomination. So it arose in respect to my contribution to the law and to women in business in particular, and to philanthropy. So those things, I guess, have all been enmeshed throughout my career. So with the law, I think there was an acknowledgement of my involvement in several committees and things that I've been on to do with the law, and
you were the first law firm that went into the cloud, and the Law Society asked Margo to give seminars on what the experience was like and what the issues were as she saw them, and that was a very important contribution.
Yeah. I guess we've been a bit pioneering, Tony, in many ways, and sometimes you're the Lone Ranger and everybody thinks you're crazy, whether it's specialisation or going into the cloud. Or I remember when we first started an open plan office in Brisbane in 2004, and the Law Society asked me to give presentations on it because it was sort of viewed as this very sort of out there thing. But in regard to women in business, I've been involved in a number of organisations, but one in particular which started in France in post-World War II, which has a focus on supporting women in business. And through that organisation, I've been the national president of it and state president for Queensland. But it's enabled me to build friendships and associations with women in a variety of businesses across Australia and internationally. So that was a great, I think, happening in my life. And in regard to philanthropy, that's something that John and I have always felt strongly about, which is really going beyond our own profession and being involved in community efforts. So I've been involved in medical research and in school foundations, and at the moment I'm doing quite a lot of work with an organisation called FareShare, which is involved in meeting food insecurity needs, and that's a growing problem. So all those things have been apart from the law, if I can say that, but they've helped enrich my experience in the law, and they've helped me also to get to know a broader sector, a broader group of people. And so many of those organisations have then been great in their support of our law firm. So, it's something that I think the acknowledgement of the Australia Day Awards, or Queen's Honours, no, sorry, I should say King's Honours now, it's something I think any recipient really appreciates.
And Margo, you did study at Harvard a few years ago. Is that the start of some international ambitions?
I probably, in terms of experience, that whole experience, which was 2004, during 2004, 2006, and then I've been over several times since and done further programs. And I'd have to say that whole learning experience has been an incredible factor in my life. It's probably been the most enjoyable learning experience that I've ever had. not only from the point of view of what I've absorbed through the lectures, but also the people I've met and the friendships I've formed internationally. And I would love to have, in fact, one of the lecturers over there said, you should get rid of the practice, sell the practice, and come across, and was encouraging of me doing some further things at Harvard. But it's tricky. John and I have had the good fortune to work in my case, a law firm in New York, and in John's case, that firm, and also a firm in London. And it would have been lovely, but we had, family commitments and things here that have sort of meant we haven't taken up some of those possibilities, but we still enjoy those connections that we've formed very much.
Both those firms, yes, the New York firm invited both of us that they'd apply for green cards for us, and they would be very pleased to have us on board, and we contemplated that. And similarly with the law firm in the UK, Farrer and Co. They invited me to stay on there as well, and I had a great experience at Farrer's with working for Sir Matthew Farrer, who sadly has just passed away in late May, and we had both of us had a long and very lovely friendship with him, and Sir Matthew Farrer was the Queen's personal solicitor for a couple of decades, and while I was working with him as well, so it was quite a fascinating and wonderful experience to be with him.
Thanks for listening today. Don't forget to subscribe, and if you require any further information, please go to our website www.degroots.com.au and book a consultation. The contents of this podcast do not constitute legal advice and are of a general nature only. Listeners should make their own inquiries about their specific circumstances and seek legal advice.